Why do you think people say their vows? Femme asked, her voice light, almost innocent as she balanced her glass of red wine in one hand. The wine swirled slightly, but she held it with the practiced ease of someone who had spent plenty of time in high-end places. Femme reclined back easily into the plush, costly armchair in the hotel lobby, shifting her weight with nary a murmur from the deep red velvet cushions. The reception area surrounding her was quiet. Soft lighting, elegant furnishings, and the faint murmur of conversations in stark contrast to the rush hour outside. I mean, she continued, her body angling slightly forward as if she were about to solve some great mystery. People really take their time, weaving words. Poetic, romantic. Almost like they're trying to be Shakespeare, don't you think? She trailed off, a small, almost playful smile curling at the corners of her lips, as though the thought of it amused her. Like she was genuinely trying to understand, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't sure if it was all just a bit ridiculous. My husband wrote me a poem as a vow, Femme said softly, her gaze fixed on the woman across from her. He asked if the heavens could barely hold me because I was just so beautiful. She let the words hang in the air, as though considering them, the corners of her mouth twitching in a strange mix of amusement and disbelief. The woman across from her, a perfect stranger, had unfortunately become the target of Femme's unwanted attention. She sat there, minding her own business, giving no indication that she wanted to be drawn into any conversation. Certainly not with someone who seemed so out of place, so clearly lost in her own world of mockery and tangled emotions. Do you think I'm still beautiful? Femme suddenly asked, her tone shifting, laced with an almost childlike vulnerability as she jumped to a new topic, catching the woman off guard. The woman hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Before she could gather her thoughts, Femme continued, as if the question hadn't even needed an answer, her words slipping out as though she were speaking to herself. I think I'm still pretty, Femme murmured, almost absent-mindedly, her gaze unfocused. But older, definitely older. Her eyes glazed over, a nostalgic look passing through her features as she stared at the quiet lobby. For a moment, the woman couldn't help but think that Femme still looked beautiful, not older as she suggested. Nevertheless, the woman found herself wishing that Femme would stop talking. It felt strange and uncomfortable. These raw, vulnerable confessions from a complete stranger, as if such intimate thoughts didn't belong in a hotel lobby with a complete stranger. We grew up together. Femme suddenly spoke, her voice taking on a strange, distant tone. You know, me and my husband, she clarified, mistaking the look on the woman's face as confusion, when in reality, the woman's desire was nothing more than to escape this conversation. We came from a humble family, Femme continued, her eyes momentarily distant. And when we started dating, he used to make me artificial flowers, promising that once we made it, he'd buy me 1,000,000 bouquets. She laughed, the sound hollow. I told him that was too much, but he said nothing was too much when it came to me. Femme leaned back slightly. You know, we first made love in a hotel, not like this. She waved a dismissive hand around the lavish lobby, as if the opulence was foreign to her. It was a cheap motel he could afford, but he decorated it. Far from home, far from prying eyes. The woman didn't need to hear this. She didn't want to be involved in Femme's fragmented memories, especially from someone whose eyes held a haunted look, like a ghost of something that had been lost. Feeling increasingly uneasy, the woman stood up and proceeded into reception, expecting to see if her room was ready. She was advised to wait. Turning back, she hoped for an empty seat, but to her dismay, all were taken. With a deep breath, she resigned herself to returning to her old seat, which had become an innocuous noose. Are you married? Just as the woman sat back down, Femme's voice cut through the silence, and she leaned in slightly, her gaze intense. The woman inhaled sharply, instinctively wanting to shut her down, but before she could speak, Femme continued, her tone suddenly sure of herself. You are married, Femme said, her voice a little too knowing. My husband can afford this hotel now, she added, leaning back against the couch, her expression momentarily clouded with pain. "Congratulations?" the woman echoed, her voice flat and uncertain, caught in the crossfire of Fem's strange mix of pride and sorrow. She wasn't sure how to respond to the words that seemed both a celebration and a mournful admission, as if Fem herself were unsure whether to be pleased or crushed by the reality. All she could do was pity the husband. Having to deal with such an unstable woman must be hard. Fem let out a hollow smile, her eyes distant, unfocused. "It's funny," she mused, voice eerily calm. "I don't know whether to be pleased or offended by what you just said." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, like a sudden storm, her expression twisted. Her anger, raw and undiluted, crashed against the woman across from her. The shift was so sharp, so unfiltered, that the woman instinctively shrank back, her hands tightening around the stem of her glass. "You know what I feel?" Fem leaned forward, voice dangerously low. "I feel like driving my fist into your gut and wiping this floor with you." The woman paled. One glance toward security told her they had noticed her distress. Still, they hesitated. "And Fem?" Fem simply leaned back, exhaling slowly as she reached for her drink. The fury on her face melted into something heavier. Exhaustion, a quiet sort of defeat. "But then, it's not your fault." Her gaze drifted, landing nowhere in particular. "Your answer is just as natural as expected. He's my husband, after all. And now, finally, he can afford a place like this. He's up there, somewhere, in one of those expensive, extravagant rooms." She let out a humorless chuckle. "Only, the woman in his arms isn't me." Silence. Utter silence at the shift in the story. Then, without warning, Fem threw her head back and let out a humorless laugh. Sharp. Bitter. It cut through the quiet like glass shattering, drawing a few wary glances from nearby tables. The woman across from her stole another glance at the security guards. No one else seemed to notice, but the air had thickened, heavy with something unspoken. The unease gnawed at her, made her grip her glass just a little tighter. Fem was a ticking time bomb, and she had no idea if a single word, of comfort, of reason, would diffuse the moment or ignite it further. But Fem? She seemed lost in her own world, oblivious to the tension coiling around her. Her voice, when it came, was eerily steady, cold with the kind of detachment that only deep pain can forge. "You know," she mused, another hollow laugh escaping her lips. "I knew he was cheating. I confronted him and he told me I was paranoid. That I had no proof, as if that was all it took to make the truth disappear." She let out a slow breath, eyes distant. "So I followed him. When he said he was going on a business trip for a week, I watched. And now, here I am." She gestured vaguely at herself, at the designer fabric clinging to her like armor. "I bought these clothes, so expensive, so carefully chosen, to fit in, to respect this place, to respect them. And this glass of wine?" She swirled the liquid absent-mindedly. "A pathetic little offering. Something to make them let me sit here and feel like I belonged. Ah, the things that money can buy." Her words lingered in the silence between them, cutting but agonizing, heavy with a sorrow too raw to soothe. And then she saw it. The judgment flickering across the woman's face as she took in her clothing, assessing her. "You think I'm crazy," Fem said suddenly. Not a question, a statement. Her gaze flicked to the woman across from her, unwavering. "You keep looking at that security guard, sneaking glances thinking I won't notice." She trailed off, raising her glass in a slow, deliberate toast to the guard, flashing him the sweetest, most practiced smile before turning back. "I'm curious. Do I really look that unstable? Do I frighten you that much?" A humorless smirk played on her lips. "I'm just a woman. A scorned, heartbroken woman spilling her tears through words because, trust me, my mascara isn't as expensive as these clothes." She paused, letting the joke settle, then let out a soft, self-deprecating laugh. If I let twin black streams run down my face, then I'll look the part, won't I? A mad woman. And what happens to mad women? They get asked to leave. Her voice dipped, edged with quiet bitterness. Because then I'll look cheap. I won't belong here. The wife won't belong here. She took a slow sip of her wine, her gaze dark and unreadable. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Yet the mistress does." "What do you want?" The woman across from her finally asked. For a moment, Femme looked surprised, almost as if the question had never been posed to her before. She exhaled, fingers tightening around her glass. "When I told my mother about the infidelity, she said not to be dramatic, that this is marriage. She asked if I was stressing my husband, told me to stop being naive and act like a woman." A bitter smile ghosted across her lips. "My friends idolize my husband. And therapy? I can't afford therapy." She let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. "You're the first to ask me what I want." Maybe not in the way the woman had meant, but Femme didn't care. Her eyes darkened and her voice dipped, low and raw. "I want to scream. I want to curse his name at the top of my lungs. I want to hit him, to slap him, to ask him why. Why?" She trailed off, her expression tightening as a frown creased her face. "But that," she whispered, almost to herself, "would make me a mad woman." A pause. "But you know what?" Femme's voice sharpened, her eyes flashing with something between rage and exhilaration. "He made me like this, and that's why I'm here." Then, just as suddenly, her tone shifted. Too light, almost playful. "And since you're here, I need some advice." She leaned forward, her energy unsettling, and the woman across from her swore she couldn't keep up with Femme's mood swings. One moment, she was drowning in sorrow. The next, she was electric with something almost manic. Before the woman could respond, Femme reached into her handbag and pulled out 2 glass bottles. Slender, elegant, perfume-like but larger. She set them on the table with deliberate care, her fingers brushing over them like they were precious artifacts. "One of these," she said, tilting her head, "contains acid." A pause just long enough for the weight of her words to settle. "The other? A stench so foul it could make someone wish for death." She leaned in, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "So tell me, which one should I use on my husband, and which one for the mistress?" The woman's throat went dry. She darted a glance at the bottles, then at Femme, then back at the around them. This woman was crazy. She was mad. Femme noticed. Of course she did. She let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head as if she had expected nothing else. The woman swallowed hard. This isn't what?" Femme cut in, her gaze steady now, eerily calm. "This isn't normal? This isn't the way to handle things?" She exhaled sharply, then leaned back against her chair, rolling the bottles between her fingers with a casualness that didn't match the storm brewing beneath her skin. "Tell me then, what is the way? What is the most dignified way to handle heartbreak as a wife?" Her voice trembled, but not from fear. It was exhaustion, frustration, desperation. She tilted her head, her eyes flickering toward the ceiling as if she could see through it. To him, to them. "My husband is up there right now with another woman." The words came out hollow, like she had said them too many times before for them to still hold meaning. "And I'm here, running out of ways to handle this situation, because confronting him in the corners of our house, our home, gets me nowhere." Femme let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Tell me, lady, how am I supposed to carry this pain without appearing insane? Without being called mad, unstable, a psychotic wife?" Her voice cracked, her mask slipping. "How?" Her breath hitched, and for the first time that night, her composure wavered. There was no longer hatred in her eyes, no sharp edges of fury threatening to spill over. There was only raw, unfiltered pain. a heartbreak too heavy for her small frame to carry. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table, as if grounding herself, as if trying to hold back the tears welling up in her eyes. The woman across from her didn't speak. Because what could she say? There was no dignified way to be betrayed. No graceful way to be shattered. And Femme was standing at the edge of something dangerous. Whether it was destruction or survival, not even she seemed to know. Then, the woman across from her reached out, startling Femme from the depths of her pain. "Sylvia Plath," she said softly. Femme blinked, confused. "Marilyn Monroe, Princess Diana, Lorena Bobbitt, Britney Spears." The woman paused, her fingers tightening around Femme's hand in quiet solidarity. Then, with a knowing look, she squeezed once more and whispered, "I understand." And just like that, the dam broke. Femme choked on a sob as tears spilled down her cheeks, black streams of mascara tracing the raw devastation on her face. She did not wipe them away. She did not care. Her shoulders trembled, her breath coming in shuddering waves. "What do I do?" she whispered, broken, lost. The woman didn't hesitate. She took the 2 bottles from Femme's trembling hands, weighing them carefully before setting them aside. Then, with quiet determination, she met Femme's gaze. "Go and be a woman," she said, "because you are a woman." Because ever since, a woman has always been called dramatic, petty, jealous, attention-seeking. Not because she was any of those things, but because she felt. A woman who asks too many questions is difficult. A woman who does not smile is bitter. A woman who loves too deeply is obsessive. And a woman who stops loving is cold. When she breaks, she is unstable. And when she fights, she is crazy. So they tell women to be quiet, to be good, to be sane. And when a woman snaps, when the cracks finally shatter into something wild, something ugly, something free, they shake their heads and call woman mad. "So go ahead and be mad," she said just when the cheating husband and mistress showed up. So Femme walked toward them, toward him. Slow, deliberate, the madwoman. Heads turned. Security stiffened. The mistress flinched. Her husband? He paled. Because now he understood. He had created this. The madwoman had arrived. And the world watched. The end.